the village of Mavumu sat on the edge of a great river, where the waters were as ancient as the land itself. Amina, the daughter of the great priestess Nia, sat beneath the towering baobab tree, listening to the winds as they rustled through the leaves. The whispers of her ancestors spoke to her, but she had learned to ignore them, for they spoke of things best forgotten. Her mother, once a powerful figure, was now distant and frail, unable to guide the village as she had in her youth. The people no longer came to seek her wisdom. They turned to others, to the new ways that had come with time. Amina's heart was heavy with grief, for she knew the village was dying. The elders had begun to speak of a curse that had befallen them because Nia had failed to honor the spirits. The ancestors' anger had poisoned the land. Nia sat in her hut, surrounded by herbs and sacred stones, her hands trembling as she tried to prepare the medicine for a village elder. She was once a woman of immense power, able to commune with the ancestors and bring blessings, but now her connection to the spiritual world seemed severed, and she was unable to help her people. Amina entered the hut, her eyes filled with concern. "Mother," she said softly, "why do you not call upon the ancestors? They are angry, and our people suffer. You must restore the balance." Nia's eyes met her daughter's, but there was no fire in them, only sorrow. "The spirits no longer hear me, Amina," Nia whispered. "I have failed them. I have failed our people. The curse is upon us." Amina was silent, her heart racing. The curse, the shadow that hung over their village. Could it truly be because of her mother's mistakes? And could it be fixed? That evening, the village elders gathered by the riverbank under the glow of the moon. Amina stood before them, her voice unwavering. "We must act. The ancestors are angry, and we cannot wait any longer. If we do not make offerings to them, our land will perish." The elders exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. They had all witnessed Nia's decline, and their faith in her had begun to waver. One elder, Mosi, stood up. "You speak of offerings, Amina, but you know the truth. It is your mother's failure that brought this curse upon us. She has abandoned the ways of our ancestors. What are we to do when our priestess can no longer commune with the spirits?" Amina's heart sank. The words stung, but she could not deny their truth. She turned to her mother, standing nearby, her face pale. "Mother," she whispered, "what can we do?" Nia gazed at the river, her eyes distant, her face etched with the weight of guilt. "I have failed you, my child," she said softly, "and I have failed this village. The spirits have turned away from me, and there is no way to restore their favor." Amina felt a surge of anger, a burning fire that rose within her chest. Her mother's words were the final straw. How could Nia give up so easily? How could she surrender the village to the curse? Amina clenched her fists. "Then I will make it right," she declared, her voice firm. "I will speak to the ancestors, and I will bring us peace. You are no longer fit to lead us, mother." Nia's eyes filled with sorrow as she whispered, "The spirits will not listen to you, Amina. They have already spoken their judgment." That night, Amina sat alone beneath the baobab tree, her mind racing with thoughts of what she must do. As the winds picked up, the whispers of the ancestors grew louder, swelling around her like a storm. Her eyes closed, and she fell into a trance. Suddenly, the spirits appeared before her, their faces ancient and stern. "Your mother has failed us," one spirit said, its voice like the rumble of thunder. "She has forsaken the old ways. and now the land suffers. Amina's heart pounded in her chest. What can I do to save us? She asked, her voice trembling. The curse can only be broken by the sacrifice of the one who brought it, the spirit replied. Your mother must die, Amina. Only then will the land be healed. Amina's breath caught in her throat. Was this truly the will of the ancestors? Amina returned to the village the next morning, her mind clouded with the vision. She could hardly look at her mother, who was still frail and distant. The weight of the vision pressed heavily on her heart. She tried to speak, but no words would come. Nia, sensing the change in her daughter, approached her gently. What is troubling you, Amina? She asked, her voice soft. Amina hesitated. How could she tell her mother the truth? How could she say that the ancestors had demanded her death? I don't know, Amina stammered. I think the ancestors have spoken to me. They say you must be sacrificed for the curse to be lifted. Nia's face went pale, but she did not cry out in anger. Instead, she nodded solemnly. I knew this day would come, my child, she said quietly. The spirits will always demand their price. That evening, Amina led her mother to the bridge overlooking the ocean. The moon was high, casting a silver glow over the water. Nia stood beside her daughter, unaware of the dark intent growing within her. Amina looked at the ocean below, its vastness, both beautiful and terrifying. Do you remember this place, mother? Amina asked. Nia nodded. This was where I made my first offering to the ancestors, many years ago. The spirit spoke to me here. Amina's heart ached as she spoke. The ancestors speak to me now, and they have told me that the curse can only end with your death. I am sorry, mother. It is the only way. Nia's eyes filled with tears. Then it must be done, she whispered. Amina, feeling both sorrow and resolve, pushed her mother into the sea below, watching as she disappeared into the dark waters. Amina stood at the edge of the bridge, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had killed her mother to break the curse. But as the waves crashed below, she felt no relief, only an emptiness that gnawed at her soul. The curse had not lifted. The land still suffered, and the village was no better off. Amina fell to her knees, her tears mixing with the salty wind. What have I done? She whispered, her voice breaking. The winds whispered back to her. The curse was not her fault, Amina. It was yours. The realization struck her like a lightning bolt. In her desperation, she had misunderstood the true nature of the curse. It was not her mother who had failed. It was she, for not listening to the wisdom of the ancestors. The village remained quiet the following morning, as though it, too, were grieving the death of Nia, the priestess. Amina stood at the riverbank, staring out over the waters, which seemed even darker than usual. She had expected the curse to be lifted, for the land to be restored, but nothing had changed. The crops still withered, the people still suffered, and her heart felt heavier than ever. The village elders, who had watched Amina's rise to power with mixed emotions, now regarded her with pity. They had expected more from the daughter of Nia, the one who had once been revered as the future of the village. Instead, Amina felt like a shadow of herself. She could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It was as though the spirits were punishing her, not for what she had done, but for what she had failed to understand. That night, as Amina lay in her hut, she heard the faint sound of her mother's voice, calling to her from the winds. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakable. You have made a grave mistake, Amina. Desperation began to creep into Amina's heart. She returned to the sacred site near the river, the place where her mother had once communed with the spirits. The elder had warned her not to go alone, but she ignored their advice. She had no one left to turn to, and the voices of her ancestors were growing louder in her mind. At the sacred site, Amina sat, cross-legged beneath the baobab tree, closing her eyes to meditate. As she began to chant, a vision overwhelmed her. In the vision, her mother stood on the bridge again, looking at Amina with eyes full of sorrow. "The curse will never lift unless you make a true offering." Nia's voice echoed in the vision. "You did not kill me for the right reasons. It was not me who brought the curse. It was you, Amina. Only by understanding the real price will the land heal." Amina's eyes snapped open, her heart racing. She had not understood before. Her mother had not been the source of the curse. It was her own actions, the selfishness of her heart, and her refusal to listen to the wisdom of the elders that had caused the suffering. Amina, feeling shaken and broken, stumbled back to the village, her mind heavy with the revelation. She was greeted with blank stares from the villagers, who had come to accept the suffering as inevitable. Their spirits were broken, and so was Amina's. She approached the elders with newfound humility, kneeling before them. "I have failed you all," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I killed my mother for the wrong reasons. The ancestors did not demand her death. They demanded that I face the truth within myself. I am the one who has brought this curse upon us." The elders exchanged silent glances. Mosi, the eldest, stepped forward. "It is true, Amina. The curse was not her fault, nor was it ever about her death. You must now make amends. Only when you restore the balance within your own heart will the curse be lifted." Amina nodded, understanding that she could no longer seek redemption through violence. She must begin by redeeming herself, restoring her connection to the spirits of the land, and seeking the forgiveness of the ancestors. The following weeks were a blur of rituals and sacrifices. Amina sought the guidance of the elders, who led her through ancient ceremonies to appease the spirits. The villagers watched as she worked tirelessly, attempting to right the wrongs she had committed. But even as Amina poured offerings into the sacred fire, she could feel her guilt weighing on her soul. The village continued to suffer, with no sign of relief. But as the seasons passed, Amina felt a subtle change in the air. The winds no longer whispered her mother's name in anger, and the water seemed to move more gently. Still, she did not allow herself to hope fully. Her journey was far from complete. The curse may have been lifted in spirit, but it would take more than offerings and rituals to heal the land and her heart. One night, as the full moon illuminated the village, Amina sat alone beneath the baobab tree, again meditating and praying to the ancestors. She had been working tirelessly for months, but still, the land had not healed as expected. The crops remained barren, and the villagers remained ill. Just as Amina began to feel the burden of hopelessness again, she felt a sudden warmth in the air, and the wind began to swirl around her. She closed her eyes, and once again, the ancestors appeared in her vision. This time, they were not angry. Their faces were serene and understanding. "You have done much, Amina," one spirit said, "but your journey is far from over. The land has not healed because you have not yet healed yourself." Amina's heart pounded. "What must I do to heal then?" she asked, desperation in her voice. "The answer lies in your own soul. You must forgive yourself for the sin you have committed, and you must show the villagers that healing comes from within." The next morning, Amina gathered the villagers in the central square. They were weary and skeptical, but Amina stood before them with a newfound clarity in her eyes. "I ask for your forgiveness," she began, her voice steady and full of conviction. "I was blinded by my anger and my desire for control. I killed my own mother, the very person who had guided me, thinking it would end the curse. But it was I who had strayed from the path of wisdom. I ask you to forgive me, and I ask you to forgive yourselves for the suffering we have endured. Only together can we heal this land." For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope in the eyes of the villagers. Slowly, one by one, they came forward, embracing Amina, forgiving her for the pain she had caused. And in that moment, something changed. The land seemed to breathe a little easier, and the air grew fresher. That evening, Amina stood at the river's edge, contemplating the journey ahead. As she stared at the water, she heard a soft rustle in the trees behind her. Turning, she saw a figure, a woman, tall and strong, emerging from the shadows. Her hair was silver, her face serene, but filled with wisdom. Amina's breath caught in her throat. It was her mother, Nia, not as she had last seen her, frail and broken, but as the priestess she had once been, radiant and full of power. "Mother," Amina whispered, tears filling her eyes. "How can this be?" Nia smiled gently. "You have done the hard work, my child. The curse was never about me. It was about you finding the strength to face your own darkness and rise from it. You are now the one who holds the power to guide our people." Amina dropped to her knees, overwhelmed with gratitude and emotion. "Thank you, Mother. I will do as you did and lead our people back to balance." Nia nodded, fading back into the shadows, leaving Amina standing at the river's edge, ready to guide her people into a new era. The next morning, the land seemed to awaken. The crops began to flourish. The villagers regained their strength, and the river flowed more freely. Amina knew that the healing process was just beginning, and there would be more challenges ahead. But she had learned a vital lesson. The true curse was not one that could be lifted by violence or sacrifice. It was a curse of the heart, and it could only be broken by the willingness to forgive and seek redemption. As Amina stood at the riverbank, watching the sun rise over the water, she knew that she had finally restored the balance within herself and the land. The ancestors, once silent, were now at peace, and so was she. Amina awoke early the next morning to the sound of a great commotion from the village. The villagers had gathered by the river, whispering anxiously. She rushed to the scene, her heart sinking. As she approached, she saw an old man, Kofi, kneeling at the river's edge, his hands raised to the sky. His voice trembled with fear. "The spirits are angry once more. The winds bring their wrath," he cried. Amina hurried to his side, her mind racing. "What is happening?" she demanded. Kofi's eyes were wide with terror. "The spirits, they have spoken again. They say the balance has not been restored, and if the offerings are not made with true sincerity, we will suffer once more." Amina's heart tightened. She had tried to make amends, but she knew that the spirits were never easy to appease. The weight of her actions, of killing her mother, had yet to be fully paid. Now, she would have to prove her sincerity, or else the village would face worse misfortune. That night, Amina ventured alone to the sacred site beneath the baobab tree. Her heart was heavy, and the burden of leadership was more than she had ever anticipated. She knelt and closed her eyes, praying fervently to the ancestors, asking for their forgiveness and guidance. The wind picked up, swirling around her, and the voices of the ancestors filled her mind once more. But this time, they did not speak in anger. Their voices were calm, like a river flowing gently through the land. "Amina," one of the spirits spoke, its voice soft and clear. "You have done well to seek redemption, but the true test lies ahead. To heal the land, you must not only restore the balance within yourself, but within your people as well. It is they who must also seek their own forgiveness, just as you did." Amina's heart sank as the realization hit her. She had thought that the burden was only hers, but now she understood that she could not heal alone. The village must also find its way back to the spirits. Only then would the curse truly be lifted. The next day, Amina called for a gathering of the entire village. The elders, who had watched her struggle with both respect and concern, now stood with her, ready to face the challenge ahead. Amina spoke with authority, yet humility in her voice. "The ancestors have spoken, and they have given us a task," she began. "The land will not heal unless we all come together and offer our apologies to the spirits. Each of us must confront the darkness within ourselves and seek forgiveness." The villagers murmured among themselves, some with doubt, others with hope. Amina's words were not enough to convince everyone. Some still blamed her for her mother's death, believing the curse was her doing. But slowly, as Amina spoke of her own journey and the weight of her sin, the villagers began to open their hearts. One by one, they came forward to make their offerings to the spirits, each one pledging to seek forgiveness for their own failings. Amina stood with the elders, watching as the people made their offerings, hoping that this was the beginning of their true healing. As the village gathered to perform the sacred rituals, Amina stood by the river, waiting. The offerings were made, and the chants of the elders filled the air. The wind had died down, and for the first time in weeks, the sky was clear. Amina looked to the horizon, her heart full of hope. It was then that she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw the familiar figure of her mother, Nia, standing by the river's edge. She appeared as radiant as ever, her face full of wisdom and peace. "You have done it, my child." Nia's voice echoed in the stillness. "You have restored the balance within yourself and your people." Amina's eyes filled with tears. "But mother, the land has not healed yet. There is still so much more to do." Nia smiled gently. "The land heals when its people do, Amina. You have taught them to seek forgiveness, and that is the first step. The ancestors are pleased with you. You have brought them peace." With that, Nia faded into the wind, leaving Amina standing alone by the river, but not for long. The winds that once brought sorrow now brought a sense of calm, and the land began to breathe again. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, growing hope. The village began to see small signs of healing. The crops began to grow again. The sick began to recover, and the river seemed to flow more gently. Amina stood on the bridge, overlooking the water, feeling the weight of her responsibilities lift ever so slightly. She had taken the first steps toward healing, but she knew there would be more trials ahead. She turned to the elders, who stood beside her in silent support. "The land is healing, but I know this is just the beginning. We must continue to honor the ancestors, and we must remain vigilant," Amina said, her voice steady. The elders nodded in agreement. "You have shown strength, Amina," Mosi said. "But true leadership comes not only from wisdom, but from humility. Lead with your heart, and the people will follow." Despite the progress, Amina knew that leadership came with its own challenges. The villagers, although grateful for the healing, were still uncertain about their future. Some still whispered about the past, about how Amina had killed her mother, and whether the curse had truly been lifted. There were those who still blamed her for the hardships they had faced. Amina sat alone in her hut, her hands clenched around the symbols of power that had once belonged to her mother. She gazed at the fire in front of her, the flames flickering with the spirits of her ancestors. How can I lead when some still refuse to forgive me? She whispered to the wind. The answer came quietly. Lead with love, Amina, and they will follow. She knew it was not enough to heal the land physically. She must also heal the hearts of her people. As the days passed, Amina faced a test of her leadership. A young man from the village, Kwaku, had been arrested for stealing food from the elders' storehouse. The villagers were angry, and the elders wanted to punish him severely. Amina knew the importance of justice, but she also knew the importance of compassion. She stood before the villagers, the weight of their expectations heavy on her shoulders. Kwaku is not the enemy, she said, her voice firm but kind. We have all suffered, and we all need healing. Punishing him will not restore balance. It will only breed more hatred. We must show compassion and help him find his way. The villagers murmured, uncertain. But Amina stood resolute. We are a family, and no one is beyond redemption. Slowly, the villagers agreed to forgive Kwaku, and instead of punishment, they helped him learn the ways of the land and the ancestors. It was a small act, but it marked the beginning of true healing for the village. That night, as Amina walked along the riverbank, she saw a vision in the water. The spirits of the ancestors appeared once more, their faces full of approval. You have learned well, Amina, one spirit said. You have faced your darkness and healed your people. The curse is truly lifted. Amina smiled, her heart full of peace. I could not have done it alone, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. It was the love of my people and the wisdom of my mother that guided me. The spirits nodded, their faces now serene. The land is yours to guide, Amina. Lead with compassion, and you will restore the true strength of your ancestors. With that, the vision faded, and Amina stood by the river, knowing that her journey had only just begun. But this time, she was not alone. Months passed, and the village continued to thrive under Amina's leadership. The crops flourished, the people healed, and the elders no longer whispered in doubt. But the weight of the past, the shadow of her mother's death, still lingered in Amina's heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the river, Amina walked to the sacred bridge, where she had pushed her mother to her death. Her heart heavy with gratitude and sorrow, she knelt and placed an offering of fresh fruit, herbs, and sacred stones by the water. The wind whispered softly around her, as though the ancestors were watching, waiting. I have done all I can, Amina murmured, her voice barely a whisper. I seek your forgiveness for the pain I caused, and I thank you for the strength you gave me. As she spoke, the river before her shimmered, and in the depths she saw the faintest silhouette of her mother's figure, her face serene, no longer filled with sorrow, but peace. Amina felt the weight lift from her chest. The curse was gone, not because of death, but because of forgiveness and redemption. The ancestors had accepted her offering. The land, her heart, and her people were at peace. The following morning, the village awoke to a new sense of unity and harmony. The elders gathered around Amina, and for the first time since her mother's passing, they spoke with full confidence in her leadership. You have restored not only the land, Amina, but the spirit of our people, Mosi said, his voice filled with pride. You have learned the greatest lesson. True power lies not in sacrifice, but in compassion and humility. Amina smiled, her heart lighter than it had ever been. She had learned that leadership was not about wielding power, but about serving her people with love and wisdom. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting light over the river and the village, Amina stood tall. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. The legacy of her mother would live on, not in the shadows of regret, but in the strength of the village and the hearts of those she had healed. The future was hers to lead, with the ancestors' blessings.